Permit me to start this way. I remember watching The Lord of the Rings when I was a kid, and even as an adult. I understood and enjoyed the story, but at the same time, I didn't quite understand the relationship between some characters. You could tell there was a history between these characters by the way they communicated, but we don't really know much, especially if you didn't read the books. Now, I'm in no way condemning the movie. Lord of the Rings is one of my favorites of all time, it's evergreen. But just sharing how I felt, like I wish they explored Aragorn and Arwen's relationship a bit to show why their love is so strong. All I'm trying to say is that there were gaps in the story, and honestly, that's how I felt when I read Genesis in the Bible, especially from the very beginning of creation to the time of Noah. From Noah, everything kind of makes sense, but prior to that, it was heavily summarized and we had questions with no way of being answered. And that's where the Book of Enoch comes in. It does a good job of filling in that gap, and beautifully too, answering almost all questions that we have. I already did a video on the Book of Enoch, but after asking you guys and reading the comments, you all suggested I do a deep dive into the Book of Enoch and explain it in obsessive detail. So here I am again, talking about the Book of Enoch and leaving nothing behind. This will be one of the most complete takes of the Book of Enoch that you'll ever find on the internet or on YouTube. So buckle down and let's begin. The Book of Enoch is the best example of a spin-off literature. It has over 100 chapters and tens of thousands of words, and it's based on a figure in the Hebrew Bible called Enoch, who isn't mentioned much in the Bible. Personally, there are two characters in the Bible that I wish I knew much about, but I can't seem to find anything about them. One is the priest, Melchizedek, who is also talked about with reverence and is important both in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And the second is Enoch. These two characters are important, especially seeing as these two characters were very important to God and even to the fathers of old, but somehow we have nothing on them. Since this video is about Enoch, that's who I will focus on. But hey, if you are curious about Melchizedek and you want us to do a video on him, then let us know in the comments, and if we get enough requests, I'll have to make a video on him. Back to Enoch. In the book of Genesis, Enoch only shows up briefly in the genealogy of Adam. Through this genealogy, we can see Enoch is the father of Methuselah and many other children, and then the text just says that Enoch walked with God and then was gone because God took him. That's it. There must be more to this story than meets the eye. What does "because God took him" even mean? Well, early Jews and Christians were never happy with such vague Bible verses, which brings us to the Book of Enoch, which did so many wonders, explaining a lot of things. Early Christians loved this book so much that it's mentioned in the New Testament. In fact, the book of Jude, which is the second to last book in the New Testament, quoted Enoch in chapter 1, verse 9. Even the book of Hebrews talked about Enoch himself. But even though it was very popular among Jews and Christians in the past, not many people today know about the Book of Enoch. Why is it like that, and what happened that the book went into obscurity? What was written in the book that makes it controversial? And, most importantly, what does it really say? Now, first of all, there is more than one Book of Enoch, and remember this because it will be important later. There are many books of Enoch, but the term Book of Enoch is usually used to refer to the first one. But there is a second book, which probably dates back to the 1st century CE and is preserved in later manuscripts, written in the Church's Slavonic language. Finally, there is a third book, which was written in Hebrew and was kept alive by Rabbinic Judaism. So there are 3 books of Enoch that are sectioned into different chapters, and we will go through all of them today. many different texts were pieced together to make the Book of Enoch. The first Book of Enoch is divided into 5 main sections, and the oldest parts of the text probably date back to the 4th or 3rd century BCE. Some manuscripts of the book were written in the Ethiopian language in the 15th or 16th century. Ethiopic, also called Ge'ez, is a Semitic language related to Hebrew, Arabic, and Amharic. It is one of the most common languages spoken in Ethiopia today. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church uses Ethiopic for liturgies, similar to how Latin was used for Catholic liturgies or the Coptic language for Coptic Orthodox Christians. This shows that the Book of Enoch has been through a lot of changes since it was first written to when our most complete manuscripts were made. Now, don't yawn and skip forward. There's a reason I'm giving you guys a quick history lesson, as it will be important later in the video. Remember, this is a comprehensive video, so all details matter. So that's a quick rundown of the text. It was originally written in Amharic, but the most complete manuscripts are written in Ethiopian. The oldest parts of the text probably date back to the 4th century BCE, but there are also parts that were written a few hundred years later. Now that I have bored you with the cold, boring history details, let's get into what the first book says. The first book of Enoch is divided into 5 parts, which are 1. The Book of the Watchers, which covers the first book of Enoch, chapter 1 to 36. 2. The Book of Parables, which covers the first book of Enoch, chapter 37 to 71. 3. The Book of the Heavenly Luminaries, which you can find in the first book of Enoch, chapter 72 to 82. 4. The Book of Dream Visions, which is in the first book of Enoch, chapter 83 to 90. And lastly, 5. The Book of the Epistle of Enoch, from the first book of Enoch, chapter 91 through 108. So let's start from the beginning with the Book of Enoch starts with praises for God and how powerful He is. Then by chapter 2 to 5, he starts to dive into astronomy, talking about the orbits, the moon and sun, the seasons of summer and winter, and how they are set in order, until we finally get to the famous chapter 6, which is what made the Book of Enoch famous. In chapter 6, Enoch talks about how the angels looked down on earth and saw the beautiful daughters of men and lusted after them. They decided to leave their heavenly abode to come to earth to make these women their wives. These fallen angels were about 200. Now, they knew what they were doing was wrong. In such, wrong was an understatement. It was wrong on a cosmic scale. This was betraying everything you stand for, just for sex. I mean, that's bad enough, but with God involved, that's double bad. To avoid anyone snitching or having a sudden change of heart, the 200 angels decided to swear an oath and bind themselves to this oath that no one will back out, and they must see to their plan becoming a reality. When they all agreed, they descended to earth in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon. Now, if you are an avid Christian, you would start to see similarities between this story and Genesis 6, verses 1. When human beings began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, too, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. Chapter 7 of Enoch also corresponds with verse 4 of Genesis 6. The thing about Genesis is that was it. We didn't get a prequel of what happened, or why these sons of God would leave their abode and come to earth. It just ended as it started. But with the Book of Enoch, those gaps are filled. The unholy union between these two species brought forth an unholy offspring known as Nephilim, also known as giants. Some people speculate that this could very much be the era of Hercules and the Perseus of Greek mythology, as well as other heroes of other cultures, because even the Bible talks about heroes of old and men of renown. I mean, Zeus very much behaved like one of the leaders of the fallen angel, in the sense that he was always sleeping around with earthly women. And mind you, the division and border control enforcement we see today wasn't like that during this antediluvian age. Now, Nephilims like Hercules were the good ones or manageable ones. There were also the bad ones, which were giants, sirens, and all sorts of evil spirits. In such, the term evil spirit, according to the Book of Enoch, comes from the children of this unholy union. Both Enoch and Genesis talk about how the descent and birth of Nephilim brought about great lawlessness that was never seen before, which brought about the flood. Again, the story in the Bible is summarized, but in the Book of Enoch, it is explained in great detail. In chapter 8 of the Book of Enoch, we see what brought upon the lawlessness, and it was knowledge. The angels taught humans things that were forbidden, knowledge that we were not ready for as a race. Now, you might ask, how is that bad? Well, that's like giving a kid a gun and expecting he won't shoot the first thing he sees. I mean, Hiroshima comes to mind. Sure, humankind learned beautification, makeup, and heck, maybe even plastic surgery back then, thanks to forbidden knowledge taught to them by these fallen angels. But that brought about fornication and prostitution like never seen before. Sure, they learned how to make swords and knives, but that brought about warfare on the smallest of issues. And those who didn't learn this forbidden knowledge from these fallen angels perished. They were known as the righteous and innocent ones who were massacred by their fellow humans who were consumed with their power. By chapter 9 and 10, we see the archangels, Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel, complaining to God about the lawlessness on earth and how many innocents were dying from it. God then decides to send a flood to cleanse the earth of all traces. He sends Uriel to Noah to instruct him on how to build the ark. He also lists the punishments for the fallen angels. Azazel, who is one of the leaders of the fallen angels, would be bound to eternal darkness and his face covered for eternity, so he would never see a speckle of light again, while most of the angels would be thrown into a prison and also in an abyss of fire, bound with chains that can never be broken forever. Their children, aka the Nephilim, are also not spared, as they will be destroyed. By chapter 12 to 15, Enoch was sent by God to the fallen angels to tell them their sentences. When Enoch did that, the angels who were already in prison were sorry for their actions and asked Enoch to intercede for them and beg God for forgiveness for them. Enoch did do this, but God rejected their petition. The Watchers, the children of heaven. I wrote out your petition, and in my vision it appeared thus, that your petition will not be granted unto you throughout all the days of eternity, and that judgment has been finally passed upon you. Yea, your petition will not be granted unto you, and from henceforth you shall not ascend into heaven unto all eternity, and in bonds of the earth the decree has gone forth to bind you for all the days of the world, and that previously you shall have seen the destruction of your beloved sons, and ye shall have no pleasure in them, but they shall fall before you by the sword. And your petition on their behalf shall not be granted, nor yet on your own, even though you weep and pray and speak all the words contained in the writing which I have written. Then, in chapter 17 to 36, Enoch is basically given a tour of what the universe looks like. I think he also got a description of what hell looks like, which makes it the only book to vividly describe hell. He saw things I don't even know how to put in words, but reading it leaves you in awe. The only time I ever got such a feeling was when I read the book of Revelation. And with that, that's how the famous Book of Watcher ends. Next is the Book of Parables. The Book of Parables, which is now the first book of Enoch 37 to 71, is the second most important part of the Book of Enoch. There are two main ideas that run through the Book of Parables. The first is an account of a person called the Son of Man, the elect one, the Messiah, or the righteous one. This person is divine and has always existed with God. This figure has been hidden from everlasting and revealed only to the elect, indicating Israel, or more likely, the faithful within Israel. This leads to the second major theme, which is the coming of this figure among men, which will culminate with his enthronement on the throne of the Most High, the resurrection of the dead, the judgment of the heavens and the earth, and the initiation of the age to come. This already sounds like the Book of Revelations, despite it existing way before the events of the New Testament were written. The beginning of chapter 38 is an introduction that talks about what will happen at the end of the world. For starters, all the kings and powerful people in the world will die. Second, the bad people who turned away from the Lord of Spirits will be wiped off the face of the earth. They will have nowhere to hide. Then Enoch had a vision after being taken to heaven in a whirlwind. Between the thrones of the Lord of Spirits and Enoch, he sees 1,000,000, 1,000, 10,000 people who never sleep, i.e., are immortal, thanking God all the time, which kind of resembles what was said in Revelation 5 verse 11. Then, chapter 46 talks about a scene that is similar to Daniel 7. Enoch sees the Ancient of Days, and another being that looks like a son of man with him. The angel that acts as a guide for Enoch tells him that the Son of Man is the same as the elect one and the righteous one that he saw before. The rest of the second story talks about what bad people do. Angels of punishment are shown setting up a burning gorge or pit with chains and scourges of punishment. However, when Enoch asks, he is told that this lake of fire is not being prepared for the sinners who live on earth. Instead, it is for Azazel and the evil spiritual forces that rule the earth. In the last short parable, Enoch talks about what he thinks will happen to the good people after the judgment, when they will no longer be harmed by evil spirits or the sinners who serve them. Their life is called eternal, not just in the sense that it never ends, but in a way that makes time impossible to measure. Now, if you notice, when I was mentioning some parts of Enoch, I was also showing some parts in the canon Bible that correspond with the Book of Enoch. Keep that in mind too, because it's important when we discuss why the Book of Enoch was banned. Next, we have the Book of the Heavenly Luminaries. Enoch shares knowledge about the movements of the heavenly bodies, which describes astronomy and its connection to the divine order. It also goes into detail about a solar calendar, different from the lunar calendar used by the Hebrews at the time. These chapters laid out the foundations of the Enochic calendar. This could be how we ultimately made a solar calendar with its 364 days. Almost like today's calendar, the Enochic calendar is split into 4 quarters, each with 3 30-day months and 1 day in between each quarter. At the end of the Book of Luminaries, Enoch gives Methuselah the books that record his dreams so that they will be kept forever. This is probably a connecting tissue that will be used to join the Book of Luminaries' contents to the rest of the story. Then, we have the Book of Dream Visions. In this portion, Enoch has 2 visions. The first is about the Great Flood, yeah, that flood, and the second is about the history of Israel, symbolically represented by animals. These visions recount the world's history from the time of Adam to the establishment of the Messianic kingdom. But first, the flood. When Enoch sees the coming flood in a dream, he tells his grandfather Mahalalel about it. The vision is about the coming flood in the world of the story. Once again, the story goes further than Genesis 7, painting a picture of cosmic collapse and annihilation. I saw in a vision the sky being hurled down and snatched and falling upon the earth. When it fell upon the earth, I saw the earth being swallowed up into the great abyss, the mountains being suspended upon mountains, the hills sinking down upon the hills, and tall trees being uprooted and thrown and sinking into the deep abyss. Mahalalel explains the vision to him, saying that sin is so bad that the earth must sink into the abyss, primordial chaos. But God might let some people stay on the earth. So he tells Enoch to pray for the earth, which he does. The first section of the Book of Dreams ends, and we enter the second section. For the most part, the Book of Dreams is made up of the animal apocalypse. This is not some kind of animal slaughter. Instead, it is an end-of-the-world vision that shows the history of the world from the beginning to the end through the relationships of different wild and domestic animals, just like George Orwell's Animal Farm. This vision, called the Animal Apocalypse, is also shared by Enoch with his son Methuselah. In the beginning, a bull and a cow come out of the ground, which is clearly meant to represent Adam and Eve. After that, their sons and grandchildren, including Enoch, are also called bulls. At this point, Enoch sees a star fall from heaven, which links the fall of the devil to what happened with Adam and Eve and their being kicked out of paradise. This star grabs Cain, the black bull, and starts to work through him. Soon after, he sees a lot of stars fall to earth. The stars transform into bulls, but it's a disgusting, grotesque version. Looking like bulls, they start to mate with different cows. Animals that are born from this unholy union are wild and hungry for blood. It's clear that this shows the Watcher's downfall and the start of the Nephilim. The 7 archangels punish the fallen angels, and then the flood comes and wipes out both evil people and the Nephilim, and the nations are made from the bulls of Noah's sons. In the animal apocalypse, Shem has another white bull, which stands for Abraham. However, Abraham is the last bull mentioned in the story of how people became humans. The last and only white bull, Abraham, stands for the type of man that began with Adam and went through the line of Seth, finishing with Noah and Shem. Isaac, his son, is a white calf. He has a wild boar and a white sheep as babies, which stand for Edom and Israel respectively, which also stands for Esau and Jacob. From this point on in the story, Israel and all of his children are shown as sheep, while the other nations' animals are shown as wild beasts, many of which are hungry or looking for food. In this part of the story, God is shown as the Lord of the sheep, which means he is the God of Israel. What makes this amazing again is that in the Gospels, especially in the New Testament, this idea that the Israelites are sheep comes up over and over again. You can pause the video to see the references on the screen and cross-check. But despite this corroboration, the Book of Enoch is still frowned upon. Finally, on the last day, all the books are opened and judging starts. The 7 archangels help make this happen. The devil is first judged. The Watchers then judge the other stars that fell. Then, 70 shepherds, which represent 70 nations from around the world, will then be judged. Those who are judged are all thrown into a fire pit. Then, Enoch woke up from his dream and thanked God for this second vision. He then started to cry as he remembered the first vision and how the flood destroyed everything. And it ended. Lastly is the book of the Epistle of Enoch. This final section includes a series of encouragements to the righteous and warnings to the sinners. It contains revelations about the future, including the resurrection and the final judgment. The main part of the Epistle of Enoch is Enoch telling his family about another vision he had, because he was told he was going to heaven. In what is now chapter 91 of the first book of Enoch, the main points of this teaching are laid out. Enoch tells his children to walk in and do what is right. This is especially important because the world is very evil, and Enoch's children will live their lives in the middle of it. However, there are two things that the righteous can do to feel better during this time of judgment. First, God will give each good person a guardian angel to keep them safe from the evil in the world. Second, they will be raised from the dead, no matter how long they sleep in the grave, even if it's a very long time. After that, he talks about what happens to the good and bad people while they sleep in the grave before the rising. For a good person, their soul will live with God until it is time for them to rise. If someone dies in their sin, but their souls will go to Sheol, where they will be punished forever in chains and flames. This particular chapter helps give an insight into life after death. At the end of the main text of the first book of Enoch, it says not to change or add to Enoch's work, or believe those who do, which again corresponds with Revelation 22, verses 18 to 19. And with that, the first book of Enoch ends. Now, while most people are familiar with the first book, not everyone knows much about the second or third book. We do have the second and the third book of Enoch, which I will get into in a moment. And trust me, the story listed there is also riveting and different from what is in the first book of Enoch. Spoiler alert, Enoch himself transforms into an angel. Normally, I should focus only on the first book, but hey, I did promise a deep dive, so here you go. The second book of Enoch was discovered in the early 19th century. There are two versions of this book. One is shorter, another longer. The longer one is believed to have suffered from Christian interpolations and interference, so I prefer to focus on the one that was preserved better. Genesis chapter 5, 21-26 tells us when Enoch was born and when he was taken to heaven, which is before the flood. The second book of Enoch adds to this story. The main idea of the book is that Enoch gradually ascends through different worlds, changes into an angel, and gains access to the secrets of creation. 200 years after his son Methuselah was born, Enoch was lying in bed and noticed that two angels were standing at the head of his bed. The sight of the two angels scared Enoch, but they calmed him down by telling him that he would be taken to heaven that same day. The angels told him to tell his family that they would miss him and that no one should look for him until God brings him back to earth. Enoch did what he was told, and also told his family not to worship idols, because those who did would die the same way the idols did. And with that, his journey to heaven begins. When he left his family, he was taken on the wings of an angel and was brought to the first heaven and was placed on the clouds. When he looked higher, he saw the ether. The angels made him see the sea above, which was greater than any sea on earth. He was also shown 200 angels who rule the stars. He saw the treasure houses of snow and dew, and how clouds come and depart. He was shown the guardian angels of those treasure houses, and how those treasure houses open and shut. Then he was taken to the second heaven, where angels showed him darkness that was worse than the darkness on earth. He saw angels that were prisoners, hanging there while they waited to be judged. Those angels who were imprisoned looked dark and were crying. When he asked the angels guiding him why those angels were locked up, they told him that they were locked up because they had broken God's rules and were doing what they pleased. After that, he went to the third heaven and saw paradise and the tree of life. Some Jewish works believe that this is where the Garden of Eden is located in heaven. He saw 300 angels watching over the garden and praising God. The angels told him that this was the place that had been set aside for good people who would turn away from sin, make good decisions, feed the hungry, clothe the naked, raise the dead, help hurt children, walk blamelessly before God, and serve Him alone. This permanent inheritance was set aside for them, while a terrible place full of pain, darkness, and gloom was shown to him to the north of this garden. There were also merciless angels in that place who had weapons, as well as a river of fire. The angels said that this was the place that had been set aside for people who disobeyed God, practiced sin against nature like sodomites, use magic, enchantments and witchcraft, idol worshippers, brag about their bad deeds, steal, lie, or slander, are angry, hateful, and bitter, fornicate, murder, and steal souls. This place of everlasting torment is prepared for the bad people. After that, the angels took him to the fourth heaven, where he could see the sun and moon rise and set. He saw the sun's circle and wheels, as well as how stars and angels move around it. He saw other flying parts of the sun as well, like phoenixes and chalkidri, which are also called seraphim and cherubim. In the second book of Enoch, these beings are described with feet and tails in the form of a lion and a crocodile's head. Their appearance is empurpled, like the rainbow. Their size is 900 measures. Their wings are like those of angels. Each has 12, and they attend and accompany the sun, bearing heat and dew. In this version of heaven, Enoch also saw the Lord's hosts singing praises to him. When he was taken to the fifth heaven, he saw countless soldier angels called Grigori, also known as Watchers. They were of human appearance, but their size was greater than that of giants. Their faces were withered, and they were silent. When Enoch looked around and saw that there was no worship of God in this heaven, he asked the angels what was going on. He was told that those angels were the same kind that listened to Satan, their master, and came down to earth to marry humans. Their actions ruined the earth by breaking the law and mixing with other people, and unholy offspring were born from them. Because of this, God judged those who had fallen very harshly, which made the Grigori cry. After that, he was taken to the sixth heaven, where he saw 7 groups of beautiful angels. There were no differences between them in how they looked, behaved, or dressed. Those were the ones who were learning how the celestial objects work, as well as about the government of the world. At that time, those archangels were more powerful than angels. They were in charge of the seasons, the years, rivers, and the sea, and they wrote down all the souls of people and what they did. Then he was taken to the seventh heaven, where he saw a very bright light and armies of fiery archangels. He also saw cherubim and seraphim, thrones of many-eyed ones, 9 units of the army, stations of light, and forces that existed outside of time and space. As a normal human reaction, he started shaking with fear at what he saw. The guardian angels beside him took him and told him not to be afraid. They also showed him God's throne from afar. It was shown to him that God's throne was in the 10th heaven. The angels left him at this point because they were told to. Enoch got scared when he was left by himself. But soon, Gabriel, the archangel, came along, picked him up, and brought him before God. Then Enoch saw the 8th heaven, which changes the seasons, the amount of rain and the amount of humidity, as well as the 12 stars that make up the circle of the open sky. Besides that, he saw the 9th heaven, which is home to the 12 stars. When he got to God's throne in the 10th heaven, he fell down in front of him. God told him to stand up. After that, his clothes turned into the clothes of glory, and God's oil was put on him. After being changed in this way, he saw that he looked like one of God's beautiful ones. Enoch then was given the work of a scribe to record the souls of mankind and the places prepared for them for eternity. And he was also taught many secrets of heaven and earth. God explained to him how he created heaven and the earth and all the things that are in those places. God told Enoch to tell all the people on earth what he wrote so that everyone would know who he was. God said that false seeds had grown on the land that doesn't fear him or bow down to him. Instead, this seed worships dead gods and refuses him. It has filled the world with lies, crimes, horrible desires, and all kinds of dirty wickedness. God then told him that he had chosen to flood the earth to destroy it because people were so bad. He also said that another seed would grow from the last seed, but it would happen a long time from now. The works of Enoch would be given to that seed, and that seed would pass those works on to the next generation, which would be even more blessed by them than the first. God gave Enoch 30 days to stay on earth and get those works known to people. After 30 days, he would be taken back to heaven. After that, Enoch was sent back to earth. When he was back on earth, he invited all his children to come and hear what he had to say. He explained to them how he was made familiar with the workings of the heavenly objects and other matters to do with heaven. He saw the guardians of hell, who were like great serpents, having the eyes of fire and sharp teeth. Enoch told his children that they could receive eternal life if they were patient and humble for the rest of their lives. As soon as Enoch was done speaking, the ground went dark, and Enoch was taken to the highest heaven. After Enoch was taken back to the skies, his family built an altar there and sacrificed animals. They had a feast and were happy that God had shown them such a great sign and given them his works to pass on to future generations. And with that, the second book of Enoch ends. In this one, we get to see Enoch again, but this time as an angel. Enoch is taken into heaven and is transformed into a very powerful angel called Metatron. This Enoch, whose flesh was turned to flame, his veins to fire, his eyelashes to flashes of lightning, his eyeballs to flaming torches, and whom God placed on a throne next to the throne of glory, received after this heavenly transformation the name Metatron. I know. The first time I heard it, I instinctively thought of Transformers too, but this was way before Transformers, so maybe the author copied from the Book of Enoch. Enoch is once again told the secrets of the universe and how it all came to be, the story about valuable metals, and how those who use them or make gods out of them will not get anything in return. Now, during my research, I found out that Metatron is actually an archangel that little is known about, which makes the third book of Enoch quite bold, because what the third book of Enoch did was say that Metatron was Enoch transformed. Metatron is said to be second only to God in wisdom, strength, and glory. He is the scribe who records the sins and merits of all beings in the book of life. He is a guardian of heavenly secrets and God's mediator with humanity. Metatron is said to be an incredibly large being with 1,000,000 eyes and mouths. He has 6 seraph wings, 2 to cover his face, 2 to cover his feet, and 2 to fly. He is said to have a voice that resembles the destruction of several stars. In such, that's how the third book of Enoch ends. The narrative concludes with Enoch being completely transformed into the angel Metatron, taking his place in heaven as a powerful celestial being, essentially becoming enthroned and given dominion over the angelic host. marking the culmination of his ascension and transformation into a heavenly figure. And with that, the Book of Enoch, from the first to the third, ends. Wow, what a story, right? One thing I can attest to with the Book of Enoch is that it certainly fills whatever gaps or answers any questions one may have regarding the events of creation, or the angels that slept with women, or the story of Nephilim. In the Bible, it was all summarized, but in the Book of Enoch, it's explained in detail. I actually went into reading the Book of Enoch as a critic, or rather taking it with a pinch of salt. But I won't lie, it's very, very convincing. Which made me ask, why was this book banned? Most of what is in Enoch, in a way, corresponds with other scriptures in the Bible, which is why I added the Bible text that corresponds with Enoch earlier on the screen. And it's not just one text, but multiple texts from different chapters and different authors and gospel, which makes me ask again, why was it banned? In such, for the first 300 years after Christ, a lot of people knew about the Book of Enoch and read the book, including the apostles of Jesus Christ. It was very popular and even seen as scripture, which is why it is found in one of the oldest Bibles around, which is the Ethiopian Bible. The first book of Enoch is seen as scripture for the Ethiopians, while the rest of the world deemed it bad, despite it having answers to some questions we have. As we've seen in this video, these stories and the way they were written down in the first book of Enoch shaped large parts of the New Testament, like St. Matthew's Gospel, the Johannine Corpus, the Petrine Epistles, and Jude. At the very least, it should be seen as an apostolic apocryphon, as St. Nicephorus I, Patriarch of Constantinople, said in the 9th century. It is apostolic because it writes down traditions that were part of the teachings of the apostles, as St. Irenaeus of Lyons and others who were directly linked to that preaching by time and spiritual fatherhood testified. It is an important part of the culture that the Bible, especially the New Testament, was shaped by. Now, I totally understand the second and third books being banned because it was clearly the work of someone. Yes, you heard right. It was not Enoch that wrote the books. It was someone else. Back then, a lot of rabbis wrote their own version of the scripture. Now, that wouldn't be a problem, except that it wasn't divinely inspired, and it was mostly about what they thought was right and wrong, which the second and third books have a heavy influence on. So yeah, even though the second and third book of Enoch really sounds like it's from Enoch, and even though it kind of continues the story, it's all, should I say, fake. The third book was written by Rabbi Ishmael. Look at it like a fan fiction. Some fan fiction can be as good as the source material, and some are even better than the source material and become a part of the lore. That's what the second book and third book were like. But the first book has merit. The oldest source I could find that didn't believe in Enoch was written by a man named Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. As an early follower of Rabbi Akiva, Shimon lived in the first few hundred years AD. Just like Rabbi Akiva, Shimon wanted to keep Judaism alive by keeping the books that Jews called scripture in order. It was also Shimon who said that Genesis 6 was no longer about angels, and he used this to say that the book of Enoch was not a biblical book. Oh yeah, apparently, Genesis 6 wasn't about angels, but was about men, and to be specific, the generation that came from Cain, since Cain was cursed, while the righteous generation came from Seth. So instead of angels sleeping with the daughters of men, it's Cain's descendant sleeping with the daughters of Seth, the righteous one. Honestly, this sounded to me like someone was desperately trying to cover something. I mean, Cain's son, Lamech, wasn't described as a giant. He was just a normal violent man, like his father. And I don't think there's any copulation between two human species that could birth a giant the size of a building. Maybe a giant as big as Andre the Giant, sure, but not as big as the Empire State Building. Also, they even said Enoch wasn't taken up to heaven, that he died. Basically saying, the word, God took him, meant he died, and went to heaven, and not necessarily him be flown to heaven, despite it being said in Hebrews 11 verse 5 that by faith Enoch was taken from this life, so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. It's almost like some people were working overtime to discredit and remove the book of Enoch. And I guess it's because of the story it portrays. If you read the book of Enoch, it shows a sort of not-so-perfect story of angels. Sure, humans are not perfect, but angels leaving God to willingly disobey him and come down is almost like a heresy. It doesn't paint this picture-perfect governance up there. If angels could disobey God, what's to say they can't do it again? Like, these questions, though thought-provoking, is really borderline heresy, saying you don't trust God's style of governance. The Book of Enoch raises uncomfortable questions about the nature of free will, the role of divine beings, and the boundaries between heaven and earth. These themes, while powerful, may have been considered too difficult or troubling for inclusion in the Bible. The theme of the Book of Enoch, dealing with the nature and deeds of the fallen angels, so infuriated the later church fathers that one, Philastrius, actually condemned it openly as heresy. Nor did the rabbis decide to give credence to the book's teaching about angels. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, in the 2nd century AD, pronounced a curse upon those who believed it. And in a way, I can't believe I'm saying this, I do understand the omission of it. If you are not strong in the faith, it can really be a disturbing topic for you. I remember someone making a case against God because of God's approval of slavery in the Bible. Of course, it was taken out of context, but that's just an example of how people can twist things. Anyway, in the 4th century, Christians started to believe the same things that these Jews did in the 2nd century. The first thing they did was accept their later Hebrew manuscripts, which were different from the Greek version that the Jews had made 280 years before Christ was born. In doing so, they also began to limit the books they believed in, which led to the Protestant Bible with its 66 books. Second, Christians began to agree with these Jewish readings in the 2nd century. Another way to look at it is that angels were no longer God's kids in Genesis 6. All these led to the Book of Enoch being lost to most of the known world for millenniums. There's no exact date as to when this happened or who encouraged the book to be destroyed, but ultimately the book was completely lost for a long time. It wasn't until the late 1700s that James Bruce, a Scottish adventurer, found the book in Ethiopia. At that time, there were rumors that a Book of Enoch was in Ethiopia, a book older than the Bible, which made James Bruce curious enough to look into these claims. It turned out it was true. A book that probably disappeared in the 4th or 6th century was finally discovered in the 17th century. He would bring 3 Ge'ez copies of the Book of Enoch with him around 1773, and it wasn't until the early 1800s that the Book of Enoch was fully translated into English. Now, at this point, the Book of Enoch was thought to be a fake by Christians because it had so many references to the New Testament and predictions about Christ. Like, you can see the similarity that it was almost certain that someone with New Testament knowledge could write this. Don't get me wrong, other prophets from the Old Testament kind of talked about the future things that would happen in the New Testament, like the prophet Isaiah, but it's nothing like the first book of Enoch. The only logical explanation was that it was fraud. Plus, it didn't help matter that there was a rave of fake books like Enoch that was also in circulation, so no one knew which was real and fake, and people just avoided it altogether again. But things changed in 1946 and 1947 when several copies of Enoch were found in the caves of Qumran, which are also known as the Dead Sea Scrolls. I did a video on the Dead Sea Scrolls, and you should definitely check it out to balance your knowledge. Now, there are a lot of reasons why the discoveries of these scrolls are so important. Number 1, it showed that the Book of Enoch was written at least 300 years before Christianity. Number 2, it showed that the Ethiopians had kept a copy that was pretty correct and hadn't been changed or altered by the bureaucracy of man. Number 3, these texts showed that the ancient Jews did in fact have a Book of Enoch, which was regarded as scripture until the Council of Laodicea deemed it wrong and controversial. Enoch's inclusion in the Dead Sea Scrolls clearly shows it was of major importance to first century believers, and this is amplified by it being in the Ethiopian Bible since it is an actual 1,500-year-old Bible. Written on goatskin between 500 to 600 AD and preserved in the arid African climate, it is the best evidence we have of an uncorrupted Bible. I hate to be the one to say it, but I think it was removed just because of how controversial it was. I mean, it's known for a fact that many church fathers, from Marcion in the year 150 AD to Martin Luther in the 1600s, tried to get rid of certain books in the Bible for various motives. Luther tried unsuccessfully to get the Book of James removed, which is a great call to faith and works. Marcion was happy with his edited version of Luke and the Pauline epistles. He didn't want anything else. Because of things like this, there is a good chance that some bishops and popes during the Dark Ages were able to use their power and influence to get rid of books like Enoch, Jubilees, and Jasher. Or heck, any book they didn't like. The actual King James also did something similar, even going as far as imprisoning people who didn't read his version of the Bible. To be honest, and this is my personal belief, and I could be wrong, so take what I say with a grain of salt, but seeing the Watchers of Angels descend to Earth to teach man things makes sense when you relate it to other culture all over the world. Almost all cultures, probably 8 out of 10, have stories of beings coming to Earth to interact with humans, and most importantly, teach humans things and give them knowledge. Now, some cultures call them gods, some aliens, but the central theme of beings coming down from the sky is there. These plot points can be found in stories attributed to the Greeks, Romans, Egyptians, the Inuit, Maya, Cherokee, Toba, Lepcha, Vogel, and the Celtic, as well as within the ancient legends of at least 600 other cultures. Not only that, but almost every culture has a story of great sin and lawlessness that brought forth the flood. Also, almost every culture has the story of how a man and his family were saved. It's all there. What's interesting is that if you read the Book of Enoch and then study the story of Anunnaki, these two really come together. My theory could be that when these 200 angels came to Earth, they lied to humans and told them they came from another planet and called themselves the Anunnaki or whatever. And since they were really angels and had crazy superpowers and abilities, it wasn't hard to get humans to start worshiping them as gods. I mean, if we can worship other humans that can die, how much more? A being that is bigger than humans. If they had come down to Earth and told the truth that they were actually angels who defied a much bigger and more powerful God because they didn't want to serve humans, the humans most likely wouldn't have accepted them. Now, some critics will say these cultures like Mesopotamia predate the Jewish culture, especially if you check our comment section, and they are right. And that's one thing the Bible never shy about. It tells the story as it is. Yes, there were other cultures thriving and worshiping gods even before the country of Israel was formed, but that doesn't mean that the story in the Bible was false or God wasn't present. If anything, it was because of these sinful cultures that Abraham, the father and founder of Israel, was called out of his own country to go to another land. So yes, semantically speaking, these cultures are older than Israel even before it was formed, so it might look like the Bible copied from them. But in reality, the Jews, aka Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, existed side by side with these cultures, and just like these cultures did as it was the trend of that time, and since there was no cloud storage, they also recorded their communion with God as a way of passing the information to the next generation. For example, Abraham went to Egypt and interacted with the king of Egypt, and it is postulated that while there, Abraham shared his knowledge and helped with the science and astronomy of the Egyptians. Unfortunately, we can't confirm that, because one thing, again, the Bible does is to summarize things, so it is not clearly stated. But hey, it has to take something extraordinary for the king of Egypt to recognize you and give you a position of influence in his country, especially if you're a foreigner. The only theory that makes sense to me is that the people saw these angels as gods and also recorded their experiences too, just like people of the Bible did. So the Bible isn't a lie by this notion, which should make the first book of Enoch scripture. Plus, even though it talks about angels, it still follows the theme of Christian faith in talking about how powerful and majestic God is, and how the righteous will be rewarded for their good deeds, and how the evil ones will be punished for eternity. So what gives? Why so much hatred towards the first book of Enoch? So why wasn't the book added? Well, the short answer was that it was never in the Bible. The longer answer would be to talk about why it was never added to the Bible in the first place. The reason why the book of Enoch isn't allowed in the Bible is because of three things. 1. Pseudepigraphal. 2. Inconsistencies. 3. Didn't pass the rules. Now, before I begin, I will concentrate only on the first book of Enoch. The second and third books have been proven to be pseudepigraphal, with a human bias of time incorporated into it, and are said not to be divinely inspired. So when I mention the book of Enoch, just know I am talking about the first book of Enoch, the one divided into 5 parts. The book of Enoch, with its 5 separate sections, was all written by different authors, plus segments from the book of Noah thrown in, and till today, no one knows who wrote the book. The authorship is unclear, and it is attributed to Enoch, the great-grandfather of Noah, but it was not written by him. Enoch is considered a legendary figure, even in Islam, and the attribution to him is part of the pseudepigrapha, meaning the true authors used his name to give an aura of ancient wisdom and authority to the book, just like how you would prefer to buy something from a company with lots of positive reviews than from a company with no reviews at all. The Book of Enoch was most likely written by multiple authors over several centuries, with estimates ranging from the 3rd century BC to the 1st century AD during the Second Temple period in Jewish history. Other examples of pseudepigrapha from the approximate same time are the Testament of Job, the Apocalypse of Baruch, and 4th Ezra, among many others. Next, we have inconsistencies. Theologically, the Book of Enoch has a lot of interesting ideas, but some of them were thought to be at odds with other well-known Bible stories. For instance, its detailed view of angels and some end-of-the-world ideas did not always fit with the mainstream of Christian theology as it grew. The devil, also known as Satan or Lucifer, was the only bad guy in the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. Albeit different name, but one guy. That doesn't mean there aren't other demons. It's just that they're not named, or even given as much attention as the devil was. But in the Book of Enoch, God says that everything bad in the world is because of a fallen angel named Azazel, which highly goes against what the Bible says about Satan being the source of all sin and evil. The book also implies fallen angels can't talk to God. This contradicts the book of Job, where Satan came to a meeting. Also implies that angels were repentant, but weren't received back by God, which is a very strange doctrine. These differences raised quite an eyebrow, and coupled with the fact that it was written by multiple people, made it hard for scholars to really and truly know the intention behind the writings, which was another thing to consider. Now, in the Jewish community, everyone had an idea of how they think God should be worshipped. So, for example, a particular sect might write a book reflecting a belief of, let's say, God wants only men to worship him, and another sect will write a book saying God wants both men and women to worship him. So even though they are Jews worshiping God, the semantics is where problems usually arise. You can see a perfect representation of this during Jesus' time, when they had two different groups, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And lastly, and one of the reasons the Book of Enoch wasn't included in the Bible was because it simply didn't pass the rules. Before a writing could be added to the canon or list of holy works in the Bible, it had to meet three main requirements. 1. Apostolicity, from one of the apostles or one of their disciples. 2. Catholicity/universality. Many believers and leaders of believers read it and accepted it as the inspired word of God. 3. Consistency, consistent with all other books of the canon. The Book of Enoch, the Gospel credited to St. Peter, and other books that aren't in the canon seem to have parts that make them not canonical based on these three criteria. Look, to be honest, it is kind of complicated, and also not complicated at the same time. Here's what I mean. 70 Jewish rabbis got together to translate the Torah, which is known as the Law, the writings and the prophets into Greek. This is what we now call the Old Testament. The rabbis did this because many Jews were learning Greek as their first language, and they wanted the Bible to be easier for modern people to understand. This is the main reason why translations are done. These translations became the famous Septuagint, which means the 70. Now, when they were interpreting, there were a lot of writings out there from different authors from different times. But the 70 decided that only a few could be proven to have come from Yahweh or been inspired by him. Then they compared all later works to the law. Those that agreed with the law were accepted, and those that didn't were, let's say, thrown out. Now, at first, and why the Book of Enoch was in the Bible back then, is because these books were added as some sort of further reading, not necessarily banned. They were put away as maybe true, maybe not, probably a mix, take it with a grain of salt kind of books. You might find it hard to believe that for a long time, Enoch and the rest of the Apocrypha were added as extras to most Christian Bibles. That is until the 4th century when it was vilified. Also, it's important to note that the Apocrypha is not the same as the few fake New Testament books that are out there, such as the Gospel of Judas and others, which are intentionally false works meant to deceive people. So when you add all of these together, you start to understand where the problem comes from. I mean, no matter how interesting and well-written a fan fiction is, it's still fan fiction. So, what do I think about the Book of Enoch? Personally, I think it's a good read, and it is riveting and kind of eye-opening, even if it's a work of fiction. That being said, I'll sum up my reply with one of the comments I came across when researching the Book of Enoch, and it was about how Christians should actually focus on what's in the Bible, as it has more than enough information to live a life that pleases God. Basically, the person was attributing searching for the Book of Enoch as having two fishes at hand, and still looking for a third one in the water when your hands are clearly full with the Bible. And that kind of makes sense to me. So I'll leave you with these words from Morpheus. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.